Hello, welcome to The Trews. Trews is true news. Subscribe here, subscribe to Trews. We want you to subscribe to The Trews. It's important that you subscribe. I'm here with Dave DeGraw. Dave DeGraw is an economics expert and activist, one of the pioneers of the Occupy movement, and helped me in my book, Revolution, by explaining a lot of complex information about economic inequality. Is that a fair introduction?
That's a very fair introduction.
David, help us to understand, in a way that isn't really boring, how the current economic situation is tyrannising ordinary people. And we're not just talking about super poor people, homeless people, people cast aside like bits of rubbish, to use a quote from Super Ted, a reference that very few of you will get. We're talking about ordinary people, ordinary working Americans and British people are getting shafted. Can you explain that to me and to everyone watching The Trews?
Right, well, to break down why I feel that revolution is inevitable, looking at the economic system here in the States, we only have full-time jobs for 50% of the working age population. And of those jobs, half of them pay under $35,000 a year. So we have an economy that only works for 25% of the population.
So the way that things are set up at the moment, it can only ever work for 25%. This system cannot provide jobs for more than 25% of people at a living wage.
Right. In a technologically advanced society, you need fewer and fewer workers. So what we have to address the issue of providing basic necessities to everybody. And in doing research for the book, I realized that we absolutely need a guaranteed income, a guaranteed living income for people to support
themselves.
This is your book, basic necessities.
Cover designed by Shepard Fairey, who's I'm always troubling for his design abilities. Now, this book, The Economics of Revolution, on the back there is a quote from Thomas Jefferson: "Enlighten the people generally, and tyranny and oppression of body and mind will vanish like evil spirits at the dawn of day." Thomas Jefferson, who was, so that's a conventional political figure. Is he a founding father, Thomas Jefferson?
He was an enlightened cat.
He was an enlightened cat, as it says in my book. In my book, Revolution, I somewhat teased Dave for talking like a beatnik. I had to find a comedic angle because, frankly, all you were talking about was 0.01% of this, 80% of the other. 65 people in the world have as much wealth as half of the Earth's population. Now, whilst those facts are incredible and hard to believe, that 65 people have as much money as half the world's population, it does need to be spiced up with jokes.
Absolutely. And I love your jokes about quantitative easing, by the way.
My quantitative easing joke is a good one. Explain to us what quantitative easing is.
So quantitative easing, the Federal Reserve created $4 trillion out of thin air, and they pumped it into the stock market.
So the Federal Reserve just goes, pumps some money out, or prints some money, creates some money.
Hits the keyboard, creates $4 trillion, sends it to the stock market. It all ends up in the pocket of the biggest players on Wall Street.
If that can happen, why can't you create some money and give it to people who really need homes and food and money?
Exactly. The Federal Reserve created this $4 trillion under the guise of stimulating job growth. Since they started this program, we have lost over 10 million full-time jobs. So this is just another part of the heist.
Why do we keep trusting them to do stuff? After they crashed the economy in 2008, they've really promised they weren't going to do anything like that again. There was a point where it looked like could be a revolution then, but billions and trillions were pumped into the economy to hold it together. It's a system that can't work on its own, isn't it? It needs to be constantly supported. It's kind of a bit like socialism, isn't it?
Socialism for the rich. Exactly. So, the biggest stat that I try to convey to people, which is, enlighten the people and, we would have a revolution, is the fact that we have $94 trillion of wealth in this country. And if people can wrap their head around that and understand that, we have a feudalistic economy, and, as I like to say all the time, and you've used this before, 1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollars, and we have a $94 trillion economy. If people understood that, they would revolt.
So what you're saying is there is sufficient wealth, there are sufficient resources. We're just living in a system that partitions the wealth and resources to an elite. When I hear things like they just print money and publish money and then pump it in and out of all, it sounds kind of odd and like a poem and sort of not real and obscene.
It's the theater of the absurd.
It really is. Now, currently in the United States of America, where we're filming, we're in New York City now, doing Trews New York. I don't know, Trews in the Big Apple, we'll call it something. Subscribe here. One of the big issues here is that there is a fast food workers movement who have unionised to protest against their wages. Explain that to us, Dave.
So they're fighting for a $15 minimum wage, a living income. You know, I mean, the management and upper level executives at these fast food establishments, they make millions of dollars a year, and they don't pay their workers nearly enough. And Walmart falls into this as well. And what happens is, because they don't pay their workers enough, you have full-time workers who have to get benefits from the government. I mean, we have full-time workers working in fast food places who need food stamps. I mean, how absurd is that?
That's obscene. Full-time workers having to get food stamps from the government. That does strike me as absurd, particularly when the stat that you gave me is the 6 Walmart heirs have as much money as the 150 million poorest Americans. 150 million, that's like half, is it, of Americans?
Yep.
Okay, Dave, so now we've understood that there is a very real economic inequality that's held together by bizarre practices. The publishing of money, quantitative easing, that I like to remark, does sound like a lubricant being applied to an anus before shafting to quantitatively ease it. That's a kind of joke that I do, Dave. You might want to put some of those in this little book here. But look at that graph. Who's ever going to understand that? What is this graph? Talk us through that. How do you sleep at night?
This focuses on the 0.01% who now has, as you will see, the greatest amount of wealth they have ever had. The inequality of wealth is now worse than the roaring 20s. The 0.01%...
The roaring 20s, you made it sound quite nice.
Yes.
Whee, it's roaring.
Roaring us.
Was it bad in some ways, the roaring 20s?
Well, the economic inequality was almost as bad as it is now.
What? It's worse now?
Almost as bad.
Fucking hell. All right, so there are some movements happening. Now, one of the things I'm continually asked, Dave, is what can ordinary people do? We feel like there's a real change is required. There's no machinery for real change. Conventional politics, as it stands, isn't going to offer that change, because for conventional politics, they have a situation that's working for them. They don't want to change it. What can we, ordinary people, regardless of how goddamn sexy we are, what can we do?
Well, I mean, the way I look at it, I don't have a silver bullet answer, of course, but
it's disappointing.
The way I look at it, there's a lot to be positive about. There's organic change happening all over the world, sustainable communities, alternative currencies, alternative energy. It's all bubbling up, and a lot of positive momentum is happening. But the problem, when I look at the economic data, I don't see how that organic change is going to affect the needed change in enough time before we descend into chaos and riots, as harsh as that sounds.
Oh, so you predict, I mean, I don't know, quote the Kaiser Chiefs, but you predict that there could be massive civil distress and disturbances. Do you think that's why the US military are transferring $4.2 billion worth of military equipment to local police authorities? Yes, I do statistics
The militarization of the police force, yes. The US prison population is the highest in the world. It's worse than the Soviet gulags.
Is it?
Yes, absolutely. It's over 2.4 million people are in prison in the United States. Those per capita numbers are way, way beyond. We have 5% of the population, global population. We have 25% of the prison population. And what they're doing now, we have this, I call it a tyrannical assembly line of incarceration. And we have, right when the economy is at a point where there's not enough jobs for people to, survive, to keep up with cost of living, the government is cutting assistance programs, and they're pouring billions of dollars into the prison industry.
I understand.
So the government is dealing with poverty by criminalizing it.
I realise, yes, it's criminalising poverty, and because there's only 25% of the population can ever work. Another way that the population could be useful is by going into privatised prisons.
Absolutely.
Harvested and farmed in there.
It's a $3 billion industry right now, annually.
Okay, so I think what we're learning on this particular episode of The Trews with Dave DeGraw, who has this book out, how do people buy it? Just go into a shop and buy it there in a shop? How do you even get it? This doesn't look like it's going to be in a shop. It looks look at it, it's all thin, it's radical. This is the sort of book that should be slipped between the covers of this book as a kind of like a porn mag.
Yes, I
see you're reading Russell Brand. Not really, I'm looking at Dave DeGraw's graph. Well, thank you. What can we ordinary people do? I tell you what, I know an answer to that question. What you can do is find causes that affect you locally and collectively get involved in them. If you think you're paying too much rent, organise. If you think you're paying too much for your mortgage, find other people that feel the same and organise with them. If you're not happy with your working conditions, organise people with your work. Eventually all these movements will coalesce and join together for a glorious movement. Is that right, Dave?
And participate in alternative economic systems, alternative media like this, The Trews.
Dave's going to have his own Trews channel, aren't you, Dave?
Yes.
Trews Economics.
I am all about it.
Watch for that. Once a week there will be Trews Economic News with Dave. You'll be like, I'll go, okay, going over to our economist now. It's Dave DeGraw. Dave, talk to us about the markets. What do all those numbers mean going across the screen? Dow Jones. Who is that guy? And what is a NASDAQ? That's Dave DeGraw there with the economic news. You've been watching The Trews with Russell Brand. True News. Subscribe here. Subscribe here. Would you tell people to subscribe here?
Right here. Right
That's
here.
where you subscribe near
Right here.
Dave's genitals.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the news. If the news was true, I want some trews. Let's have some trews.